The resistance against the message manifested in several ways, which will be summarized as follows. Initially, the opposition sought to appeal to Mecca's highest authority, which was not a singular ruler but a council of influential leaders. In Mecca, the political landscape was characterized by a lack of centralized authority. Unlike a civilization with a singular ruler, Mecca was governed by a collective of senior figures, each representing different tribes. These tribal leaders, while lacking absolute power, wielded significant influence within their respective tribes. For instance, the Banu Hashim had its own chief, as did other sub-tribes such as the Banu Makhzum and Banu Abid. The governance of each tribe was determined by its chief, reflecting a decentralized system of leadership. The leader of the Banu Hashim was Abu Talib. Among the Arabs, it was customary that tribal leaders were held in the highest regard and were never deposed or disobeyed. This respect ensured a seamless transition of leadership from father to son, as exemplified when Abu Talib assumed leadership upon the death of Abdul Muttalib, being the most esteemed among his siblings. Initially, when the Prophet began his mission, the tribal leaders approached Abu Talib with a plea for intervention. They informed him of his nephew's criticisms of their idols and his divergence from ancestral traditions, urging him to act against the Prophet. Abu Talib, preferring to avoid confrontation, offered some conciliatory words and attempted to defer the issue, hoping it would resolve itself. However, the situation escalated as more people began to embrace the new message and return to Mecca with reports of the Prophet's teachings. The leaders intensified their demands on Abu Talib, applying pressure through threats, bribes, and appeals to his sense of honor. They argued that the Prophet's teachings insulted their forefathers, although the Prophet himself had not directly denigrated their ancestors, but merely critiqued idolatry as misguided. This exaggerated portrayal of the Prophet's message is indicative of how opponents often inflate minor issues to justify their hostility. They accused the Prophet of undermining their traditions, despite his actual message being a call for the rejection of idolatry rather than a personal affront to their ancestors. The leaders demanded that Abu Talib either halt the Prophet's preaching or surrender him for them to deal with as they saw fit. Abu Talib faced unprecedented pressure from his tribe. As a leader, he was accustomed to wielding authority but was now confronted with a situation that tested his capacity to maintain control. Leaders often find themselves vulnerable to the demands and expectations of their followers, which can constrain their ability to act independently. This dynamic is particularly evident when leaders must balance their personal convictions against the collective pressure from their community. In this context, Abu Talib was presented with an ultimatum: either suppress the Prophet or relinquish him to the opposition. The notion of turning over a member of one's own tribe was both legally and culturally unacceptable, as such an act would breach the code of tribal solidarity and invite severe disgrace. Historically, Arab tribes maintained a strict code of protecting their own, and any deviation from this norm would have been seen as an egregious violation of their traditions. Feeling overwhelmed by the situation, Abu Talib sought a private audience with the Prophet. He expressed his profound emotional distress and implored the Prophet for mercy, citing his advanced age and the pressure from his tribe. Abu Talib's plea represented one of the most poignant moments in the Prophet's life, highlighting the deep affection and respect Abu Talib held for him, akin to that of a father. In response, the Prophet Muhammad articulated his unwavering commitment to his mission. He famously declared that even if offered the sun in his right hand and the moon in his left, he could not abandon his mission until he succeeded or met his death in its pursuit. In another version, he compared his dedication to a stick that could not be illuminated by the sun, symbolizing that his mission's light transcended any worldly measure. This metaphor underscored the profound and resolute nature of his dedication. Moved by the Prophet's determination and sincerity, Abu Talib ultimately relented, promising not to interfere further. He vowed to protect his nephew and refrained from condemning his actions, even during the subsequent boycott when he endured hardships alongside the Muslims. Despite the Quraysh's continued opposition, Abu Talib honored his commitment and supported the Prophet. The Quraysh, dissatisfied with Abu Talib's stance, sent a broader delegation to him, representing a more extensive faction of the Quraysh tribe. This marked a significant escalation in their opposition, setting the stage for the forthcoming boycott. The Quraysh proposed a new strategy, suggesting they had chosen a respected young leader from another tribe, indicating a strategic shift in their efforts to oppose the Prophet Muhammad. The proposed arrangement was for Abu Talib to adopt the son of one of the Quraysh leaders, effectively making him his own child. In exchange, Abu Talib would relinquish his nephew, allowing the Quraysh to deal with him as they saw fit. Abu Talib responded with intense indignation, denouncing the proposal as a grossly unjust and imprudent exchange. He criticized the notion of nurturing one of their own while they sought to take his nephew and end his life, deeming it an egregious bargain. The proposed arrangement entailed a reciprocal agreement wherein Abu Talib was required to adopt the son of a distinguished Quraysh leader. This arrangement was designed to serve as a replacement for his own nephew, effectively transferring the latter into the Quraysh's control. The intent behind this exchange was to mollify the Quraysh, thereby granting them the discretion to manage Abu Talib's nephew according to their own wishes. Abu Talib's response to this proposal was marked by vehement disapproval. He vehemently criticized the arrangement as a grossly unfair and imprudent transaction, condemning the idea of nurturing one of their own while they sought to jeopardize his own kin. Abu Talib characterized this proposition as both ethically objectionable and strategically unwise. At this juncture, the situation became particularly dire. The Quraysh's collective effort against Abu Talib underscored the severity of their opposition. Abu Talib, known for his wisdom and role in preventing bloodshed during the reconstruction of the Kaaba, was now faced with unprecedented hostility. His previous actions had earned him considerable respect, making his neutrality a significant stance. A prominent figure, he was known for his prudence and had historically acted as a mediator in conflicts. His decision to side with the Prophet Muhammad was both unexpected and impactful, highlighting his role as a critical decision-maker. In advising Abu Talib, this leader emphasized that the Quraysh had exhausted all reasonable options. They urged Abu Talib to accept one of the presented choices, indicating that further options were unlikely. The Prophet's acknowledgement of such individuals underscores the principle that not all non-Muslims should be regarded with the same level of disdain. Islam does not advocate indiscriminate hatred or contempt. Rather, it recognizes the diversity of character among non-believers. Some individuals, even if they do not adhere to Islam, show commendable traits and support human rights and justice. In the early days of Islam, Abu Talib's predicament reflected a broader conflict between individual loyalty and collective pressure. The Quraysh's ultimatum left Abu Talib in a precarious position, facing a monumental choice with far-reaching consequences. This episode illustrates the profound challenges and moral dilemmas faced during the formative years of the Muslim community. A leader of considerable distinction, Abu Talib was recognized for his diplomatic finesse and prudence. The Quraysh's insistence on presenting him with a stark ultimatum, either accede to their demands or face severe repercussions, reflected the intense pressure they were applying. They asserted that they had exhausted all reasonable options, thereby demanding that Abu Talib make a definitive choice. The Prophet's commendation, despite his lack of conversion to Islam, illustrates the nuanced approach the Prophet adopted towards individuals of different faiths. It underscores the principle that not all non-Muslims are uniformly antagonistic. Some individuals, although not adherents of Islam, possess admirable qualities and contribute positively to society, meriting recognition and respect. In the formative years of Islam, Abu Talib's predicament underscored a profound conflict between personal loyalty and collective pressure. The Quraysh's ultimatum placed him in an exceptionally challenging position, reflecting the broader difficulties faced by early Muslims in navigating the complex socio-political landscape of Mecca. This episode exemplifies the moral and ethical complexities that characterize the early years of the Islamic community. At a critical moment in his life, Abu Talib found himself at a crossroads, embodying the pinnacle of his illustrious lineage. As the son of the esteemed Abu Talib, his heritage was of immense value to him. In this pivotal situation, Abu Talib was poised to acknowledge the truth of Islam, while Abu Jahl stood nearby, surrounded by the Quraysh elite. The Prophet Muhammad, earnestly urging his uncle to embrace Islam, witnessed a sudden intervention. Abu Jahl, observing Abu Talib's momentary hesitation, strategically appealed to the ancestral religion of Abu Talib's forefathers, rather than directly addressing paganism. This maneuver effectively silenced Abu Talib, preventing him from declaring his faith. The Prophet Muhammad, deeply moved by the gravity of the situation and his profound affection for his uncle, resolved to seek Allah's forgiveness for Abu Talib, despite not having explicit divine authorization. This act of intercession reflected the Prophet's emotional depth and personal sacrifice. Prophets are traditionally bound to act under divine guidance, as exemplified by the Prophet Yunus, who faced consequences for departing from his people without permission. Thus, the Prophet Muhammad's actions were constrained by divine will, and his persistent plea for forgiveness continued until several Quranic verses were revealed. These verses clarified that it is inappropriate for the Prophet and the believers to seek forgiveness for non-believers, even if they are close relatives, emphasizing that guidance is solely at Allah's discretion. The emotional significance of Abu Talib's situation is further illustrated by an event during the conquest of Mecca. When Abu Bakr brought his elderly father, Abu Kahil, who was a pagan and adversary of Islam, to the Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet's response was laden with deep emotion. Despite Abu Kahil's late conversion to Islam at the age of 80, the Prophet expressed a poignant regret, wishing he could have seen Abu Talib embrace Islam. Abu Bakr lamented that he would have exchanged even his own father's acceptance for Abu Talib's conversion, underscoring the profound love he held for the Prophet. The divine wisdom behind Abu Talib's continued status as a non-Muslim is multifaceted. His conversion would have resulted in a loss of his leadership, status, and the protection he provided to the Prophet. Allah's decision reflects a deep understanding of the complexities involved in sustaining the Prophet's mission. Abu Talib's role was crucial. His position provided essential protection for the Prophet, enabling him to spread Islam effectively. It was only after Abu Talib's death that the Prophet Muhammad was compelled to leave Mecca for Medina due to increasing threats to his life. This narrative illustrates a key lesson. Even the Prophet Muhammad, despite his elevated status, could not alter Allah's will. The Prophet, though highly revered, was fundamentally human, and his inability to guide even his closest relatives highlights the principle that divine guidance is exclusively within Allah's control. This serves as a reminder that no human, regardless of their spiritual stature, can dictate Allah's will or the destinies of others. During his lifetime, the Prophet Muhammad was unable to shield his own uncle from the tribulations of disbelief, reflecting a divine wisdom that surpassed human understanding. It is noteworthy, as we conclude this discussion, to observe the contrasting fates of the Prophet's four uncles, each occupying a distinct status within the Islamic narrative. Despite their shared lineage, which holds no intrinsic merit in Islam, their actions diverged significantly. The Prophet's uncles were all sons of Abd al-Muttalib, yet their individual contributions and roles varied greatly. Among them, Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib stands as the highest-ranking figure in the early Islamic community. His martyrdom and valor earned him a revered status unmatched by any other. In contrast, Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib, while a notable and devout Muslim, did not attain the same exalted rank as Hamza. Abbas embraced Islam later in life and was considered righteous, but he did not reach the level of the 10 elite companions of the Prophet. The remaining two uncles, Abu Talib and Abu Lahab, never accepted Islam. Abu Talib, despite his significant status as a protector of the Prophet, remains the highest-ranked non-believer in Islamic history. His profound influence was evident, yet he did not embrace Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, deeply affected by his uncle's fate, was reported to have expressed his inability to secure Abu Talib's salvation through his own intercession. The Prophet stated that he had petitioned Allah for Abu Talib's forgiveness, and as a result, Abu Talib was granted a less severe punishment in hell compared to other non-believers. This narrative illustrates the limits of intercession and the profound impact of divine wisdom. Conversely, Abu Lahab, the Prophet's uncle, is the only individual explicitly condemned by name in the Quran. Surah al-Masad, which curses Abu Lahab and his wife until the Day of Judgment, underscores his role as a staunch opponent of Islam. This surah serves as a stark reminder of the consequences faced by those who actively oppose the message of Islam. The divergent fates of these four brothers, each sharing the same father but differing vastly in their moral and spiritual standing, emphasize a crucial lesson. lineage alone does not determine one's status or salvation. The fundamental message conveyed here is that individual actions and righteousness are the true measures of one's worth in the eyes of Allah. On the Day of Judgment, no familial ties will avail one of divine mercy. It is solely the deeds of each individual that will count. The Prophet Muhammad's initial public message was a clarion call for personal responsibility and righteousness, underscoring that no one can intercede on behalf of another except through their own actions. This principle remains a cornerstone of Islamic teaching, emphasizing the necessity for each person to live a life of integrity and devotion to attain Allah's favor.